So the weighting conversation is an interesting one to have with your leadership team. The essence of the conversation is this: not all the strategic objectives can be equally important. If everything is equally important, therefore nothing's important. So we need to make some tough choices about what things we should focus on now in order to get ready for the future. Again, the simple example is with our children, we focus on education, hoping that that will help them lead a better life sometime in the future. So education becomes a higher priority. So let's talk about that conversation for a little bit. What we're trying to do, if you remember in the example from earlier on from the Bank of America, once we've got the strategic objectives and the arrows, the next step is to add on the weighting. What is the relative importance of these different strategic objectives to the success of the organization? The strategic objectives should remain basically the same across time, but the weighting will change. So a couple of things to think about. First off, help everyone understand that by the time we're done, the owner of that area, the decider, ultimately has the last say on the weightings. Again, it's like a parent with your child. We can all have a great discussion about priorities, but at the end of the day, the parent's got to make that call. Inside an organization, the process owner or the strategic objective or area owner has that final say. Why? Because they've been voted into that position or moved into that position because they have skills, knowledge, capabilities that lead them to be effective. Secondly, they're exposed to meetings and conversations that the rest of us are not, which allow them to get that longer term perspective. Third, it is their job to have that longer term perspective. Where we might be working in the process and doing our daily activities and transactions, their job is to look out farther in time. Also, make sure that everyone understands that they're working on behalf of the overall process, not their specific area. So the question that we're trying to ask is, what should our emphasis be? And understand that emphasis sort of includes money, people, managerial attention, and is a combination of those things. So typically we try to do this through a couple of steps. First, we're going to take a look at all four perspectives and try to allocate 100% across those four perspectives, or if you're using 5, whatever that might be. So it might be 20, 20, 40, so forth. And your idea is to guide your thinking in those broad categories. And what you might want to do is flip chart those down, have that debate, and eventually reach a consensus, or the owner will tell us finally what the answer is. Once we've done the whole scorecard, then we're going to step down and take a look at each of the strategic objectives within each perspective. So let's take a look at it. Step 1, we're going to take the strategy map here on the left, and in this example we're going to be weighting it for, say, 2008. By the way, this is a strategy map for a boys' school, and you can see that the way that they've decided the weighting for the next year is 50% of the focus is on their internal processes, 25% is around the customers. So 75% of their strategies across these two perspectives. It's a private school, so a little bit of weighting around the financial, but the rest of the weighting is around the enablers. So if we take a look at this, a couple of core concepts, right? The weighting doesn't represent necessarily the number of people, money, even managerial focus. It's kind of a combination of those things. What some of our clients in California say, the energy related to each of these. And the weight in this case is for the overall organization. In this case, not just the junior school or the senior school, but the whole thing. Later on, you might want to re-weight this for each of the two different schools. And finally, we're looking at it for the next year. And so it's that overall weighting of that part of the journey. Once we've done that, we then go in and allocate that weighting by perspective within the strategic objectives inside that perspective. So in this case, we gave the internal perspective a weighting of 50, and that needs to get spread out across 3 objectives. The other thing to talk about is the time frame. Typically, we're building a scorecard to look out 1 year, but you can also weight the scorecard for where we should be in, say, 3 or 5 years' time, when you're beyond the near-term transactional issues that you're fighting your way through, so you can begin to see what the vision, the longer-term goal is. In fact, you might want to think about who owns which one. Typically, the leadership team owns the 1-year weighting, and the CEO owns the 3 or 5-year weighting and needs to report back to the board of directors about that 5-year weighting. Part of the balance word of the balance scorecard is how do we balance the near-term needs for, finance, sales, revenue, profitability, and the longer-term needs of the organization in terms of viability and sustainability. And the two weightings of current year, 3 years out, provide that broader footprint of analysis.